Hi, it's Shadow Hero 90, welcoming you to my show, Sexism in Movies and TV, where I more or less call out the insane level of misandry that these retards in Hollywood put in both film and television. Now, I've been doing this show for 7 years. But the reason as to why what you'll be seeing this season could be worse is the fact that it's marketed towards children. A demographic that doesn't exactly know how the world works and can easily be misled. Now, what I reviewed in the Season 6 finale was gynocentric, sexist, and misandric to a degree where there's no way I would be able to get through a third viewing of this piece of shit. I'm currently working on this book. In this book, I'm going to be proposing a theory. And part of that theory is that gynocentric shows, like the ones that I will be attacking this season, are the reasons why young boys and young men have such unbelievably low self-esteem. And it's because that all of this sexist bullcrap is marketed to kids. So, anyways, I welcome you to the 7th season of Sexism in Movies and TV. Okay, in this episode of Sexism in Movies and TV, I'm going to be reviewing the Fairly Odd Parents episode, Love Struck. Something that has tons of unfortunate implications and is a really fucked up episode. Now, this isn't the kind of episode that gets worse and worse the more that you think about it, but it is a horrible abomination. And yes, this is gonna be one of those reviews. You know, the kind where I essentially give you a quick recap as to what the episode's about and spend the rest of the review telling you what's wrong with it. With that all said and done, let's begin ripping this sack of crap a new one. The episode starts with Cupid and his cherub drones preparing for Valentine's Day as if it's some kind of a war. Cosmo and Wanda bring Timmy to see this Valentine's Day parade. After a bit of hostility, Cupid shows off how much power he has when it comes to love, and kinda shows Timmy that his one true love, even though that is never the case throughout the series, would be Tootie, even though she is, well, the show stops using her less than her sister Vicky. So, yeah, it's kind of obvious that that was a bullshit prediction. Timmy wants Trixie Tang to be his Valentine, but when Cupid shows him his prediction of Timmy's love life, it turns out he's gonna be destined to marry Tootie, who is more or less a deranged stalker. This scares Timmy and says, well, he doesn't think that would be possible. Wanda, being the jackass that she is, finds this hilarious. Timmy doesn't like this, and then again, why would he? Tootie is an obsessive stalker. And in all fairness, Cupid is more or less using his holiday to basically put Timmy in a relationship with her, something that could easily end up ruining his life. The minute Timmy objects, Cupid chews him out and tells him he's got an arrow with Timmy's name on it, and he's going to use it however way he chooses. However, Timmy is not taking no for an answer, and tries to set out to prove that Trixie is his real Valentine, not Tootie. In school, it's shown that everyone, except for Timmy, is in a relationship. And yeah, for Valentine's Day, a whole ton of boys show up and shower Trixie with gifts, such as a pony, love potion, and when Timmy shows up, trying to be her Valentine like everyone else, he just made her a drawing. Bouncer flips a switch, and Timmy is ejected into the air. Then they do this sexist musical number that is not only femme-splaining, but it's completely sexist, implying that, men have to do all the work in Valentine's Day. And when I say I don't mean all of the work, but they literally have to do 10 times the work and get next to nothing in return. Timmy then draws up plans for something that's surely gonna win Trixie over, and it's more or less this big musical number. Yeah, and surprise, surprise, it doesn't work and blows up in Timmy's face. And to add insult to injury, Trixie made sure that when she launched him off, he'd end up landing in front of a whole ton of people to laugh at him, so she could call him a loser. So anyways, Timmy goes through his breaking point and wishes that men and women were more or less separate, which causes all the girls to be teleported away, along with all the women too. The planet is now separated with a massive wall separating both men and women. And then this piece of crap gets even more unrealistic, as they throw about sexist stereotypes, claiming that they can actually hear themselves think. They somehow build a utopia in only 10 minutes, despite the fact that almost everything in the modern world was built by men. Cupid finds out about this and he's pissed off, and because Wanda's a woman, she gets teleported away too. And without people being in love, Cupid is not only losing power, but is apparently dying, which more or less seems like an act of karma, as opposed to Timmy being an asshole. We get another sexist musical number with Timmy's dad acting like a dog, and Cosmo notices that there's something missing in his life. He hugs a tractor and names it Wanda. While in the girls' side of the planet, Timmy's mom hugs a waffle iron, also realizing that something is missing from her life. Timmy brings both men and women together, and when the women ask if they should wash the men, that's just, this is fucking misandric. I can't believe Butch Hartman allowed this in his show. And then the two sexes go to war. Kinda obvious that the men would win, but because we couldn't have an ending where man dominates woman, as this scenario would have played out in real life, Cupid finds out that Timmy Turner is behind this, and gives his world without love is a world filled with hate, black and white, straw man fallacy. Cupid brings Timmy to him and demands that he fix this. And in all fairness, this would, if anything, if this special didn't want to be a piece of shit, it would have had Timmy tell Cupid to go fuck himself. But since we're not gonna get that, Timmy is willing to do Cupid's job for him until he gets enough power back. Cupid apparently drops the arrow and pretends that he learned his lesson, while Trixie then walks up and realized, well, somehow she was won over by that big musical Timmy did, and wants to be his Valentine now. And when Timmy sees Tootie heartbroken, he basically stands up the girl he wanted for the obsessive stalker, and accidentally stabs himself in the ass with the arrow that Cupid gave him. And yeah, they try to frame it as Timmy learned his lesson, but no, it was just Cupid being a good-for-nothing son of a bitch. And now, with that said, I'm gonna rip into this piece of crap and tell you everything wrong with it. I'm just gonna say it. This wasn't the kind of thing where Timmy needed to learn a lesson. Cupid was legitimately the villain of this episode. I don't care if the episode tries to frame him as an innocent bystander who was hurt by Timmy being a selfish jerk. He is the villain of this episode. Every bad thing that happens in this episode is because of him. When Timmy requested Trixie Tang, instead of just letting it pass, Cupid was a dick about it. He told him that Timmy's future was to end up with Tootie. This more or less scares Timmy and tries to deny that. And when he does, Cupid gets pissed off and tells Timmy that he has an arrow with Timmy's name on it, and he's going to use it however he wants to. This more or less drives Timmy to take drastic measures in order to avoid Cupid's prophecy. And with each rejection, Timmy's lengths of avoiding Cupid's prophecy and winning Trixie's heart, well, they just go higher and higher, until Timmy is publicly humiliated, which causes him to resort to making the wish that more or less separated both the genders. And yeah, Cupid ends up in some pretty bad shape and actually needs Timmy's help. And if this were written in a proper manner, it would start with Timmy throwing in a few smug one-liners, like saying, "Oh, Cupid, you look terrible," or "Oh, Cupid, you have definitely seen better days." Yeah, and when Cupid gives Timmy the world without love is a world full of hate, black and white, straw man fallacy, that would basically be the part where Timmy either tells Cupid to go fuck himself, because it's basically his fault that all of this happened, or not even let him get to that part and just walk out of the hospital room. No, this jackass could have kept it to himself, but no, he had to rub it in Timmy's face like a smug douche. So, in all fairness, he kinda deserved this. And he also deserved Timmy to tell him to get bent after putting him through that, and indirectly causing him public humiliation. Okay, I'm not sure if this is true, but in the original fables that surrounded Cupid in Greek mythology, he was not exactly the best person. He was going around shooting people with those arrows, more or less to drive people mad with, I guess the best way to put it is drive them mad with lust. And when Timmy accidentally stabs himself in the ass with the love arrow and falls in love with Tootie for the day, the episode tries to make it seem like Timmy learned his lesson, when in reality it was just Cupid being a dick. This more than justifies stuff like Timmy's secret wish, as it potentially gives Timmy Turner the out he needed to not end up with Tootie. Given that when Timmy temporarily loses Cosmo and Wanda in that episode, and is aged into a 60-year-old man, he's still single. And when you look at Love Struck, that actually kind of makes this episode makes it look even better, even though people say the show should have ended with Channel Chasers. Because that episode's ending, heavily implies that Timmy does end up marrying his stalker. An obsessive and possibly deranged one at that. But, like I said before, Cupid is basically just a fucking douche. Come on! Even the Looney Tunes short, The Stupid Cupid, actually got this part of the character right. That came from a part of the franchise that is no longer seen as, well, politically correct or acceptable. And it is the kind of thing that a lot of idiots lash out at, as opposed to lashing out at something like Lovestruck from the Fairly Odd Parents. As mentioned previously, I am a writer. This came up in the last episode of this series. Now, if I were to rewrite Lovestruck, which I could do, I could easily make that happen, make it 10 times less sexist, well, it would be better, but in this part of the video, I'm going to give you 4 hypothetical storylines that would work as a rewritten and all-around way better version of the sexist piece of crap that Nickelodeon and Butch Hartman actually thought would fly as a Valentine's Day special. 1. Have Timmy not want to have anything to do with Valentine's Day. And maybe when he's talking to Cupid, actually just try declaring a truce. The type of, you stay on your side of the fence, I stay on my side type of agreement. But Cupid is 100% unreasonable, and only decides that Timmy's true love will be Tootie after he tried to declare a truce, and more or less does this to piss Timmy off, and sees it as Timmy trying to weasel out of Valentine's Day, and then rubs Timmy's future with Tootie in his face. If you did that, then Timmy's wish to separate men and women would seem very much reasonable, and when Cupid freaks out and eventually tries to get Timmy Turner to help him, Timmy would be more than justified if he were to tell Cupid, "Hey, jackass, all I wanted was for you to not shoot me in the butt with one of your love arrows. You wouldn't give me that, so you drove me to this. It's your fault that you're almost powerless, and you brought this on yourself." Timmy would help save Valentine's Day under the condition that he's left out of it, and Cupid would be the one who would more or less learn his lesson. And this would possibly cause him to think that maybe he's been a jerk since time started. As a character, Trixie Tang was always, a character that was written to be extremely over the top. She's spoiled, rich, gets a lot of gifts on Valentine's Day, as we saw in this episode, and, this episode would work a lot better if she actually received consequences for essentially publicly humiliating Timmy. I mean, during the scene where Wanda thinks that there's something missing in her life, have her just have this brief flashback to, well, any point in the past where she would have been around Timmy and Cosmo, and have Wanda accidentally spill the beans to all the other women as to what happened. I mean, she was sent there with them, and after Wanda accidentally spills the beans, the rest of the girls and women turn against Trixie. I don't know what would happen afterwards. Maybe Timmy would save her when he's undoing this and helping Cupid. I don't know, but it would still be better than what we got. And if you're wondering why I wouldn't have any of the men turn on Timmy, well, it's because I feel sorry for what this boy went through. I mean, when he failed to win Trixie over the second time, she publicly humiliated him in front of both genders, who really did find it funny. Okay, number 3. Have the episode take place at least a week before Valentine's Day, and already there are boys lining up to be Trixie's Valentine, showering her with all sorts of gifts and boxes of chocolate, the whole shebang. Timmy tries and fails as per usual, and then he'd try again, and like in the actual version that was made, would get publicly humiliated. Then, after his heart has been he's basically got a broken heart, and then makes a wish to Cosmo and Wanda, but we wouldn't really, as the audience, wouldn't hear what he wished for. Trixie would then wake up the next day and find out that she's now a boy. And as the episode would go on, we'd see that the popular kids, all 4 of them, had their genders swapped. And in addition to that, Trixie was turned into a nerd. She constantly gets bullied by her former friends, and eventually they play a prank on her to publicly humiliate her the same way she humiliated Timmy. And then she would actually realize what she did to this boy and how wrong it was. Eventually, the popular kids would get their genders reversed again, setting everything back to the way it was before Timmy wished for Trixie to know what it's like to be on the receiving end of one of these stunts. And then she would approach Timmy and ask to be his Valentine. He'd accept, and it'd be a happy ending. Because, from what I heard, this character was meant to be redeemable. But there's no way she ever could be, as she was written way too over the top to ever be redeemed. This could have been her redemption story, and it would have made sense, and it would have made her less spoiled and greedy. In the version that was actually made, she learned her lesson after, well, realizing the fact that the whole song and dance number that Timmy gave her was the best gift she got. And by the best, I mean it was the most expensive. So yeah, everything I just said works a lot better than what Butch Hartman wrote. Okay, now the idea of the girls and women going from nothing to a utopia in only 10 minutes is 100% fucking unrealistic. So here is hypothetical plotline number 4. Have Wanda be the one who magically created this utopia, and have her construct the girl-in-wall, and have her essentially manipulate the women and girls into worshipping her as a goddess. I mean, it would fit with Wanda's character. In fact, now that I bring it up, in this situation, this is the kind of thing Lisa Simpson would do if she could. And I only bring that up because these two characters are actually quite similar. A female character who is stupid but thinks she's smart is nowhere near as smart as she thinks she is, and more or less, well, Wanda never really felt entitled to worship, but Lisa Simpson did. I mean, if you're gonna do something like this that's unrealistic, just have Wanda create Hersdale as a female utopia, only under the condition that she's worshipped as a goddess by all the girls and women. Have her, well, since Wanda doesn't remember every part of her life because of Timmy's last wish, have her poison the minds of every girl and woman living there while getting them to worship her as their goddess. And when the girl-in-wall falls, have Wanda cause the war of the genders because she doesn't want to give up her position of being a false goddess, even if she remembers Cosmo and Timmy. She could be in this episode like the femputer from Futurama. Yes, I know that this would be out of character, but at least it makes sense. Better storyline number 4. Trixie takes Tootie under her wing and essentially molds her into her image. This premise is simple. Valentine's Day is coming. Have Tootie just show up and have Timmy reject her. And once again, make it clear that Valentine's Day is at least a week away. And yeah, Tootie would run off and cry, but then she'd find out that every boy in school has a crush on Trixie Tang. So Tootie would then ask Trixie to essentially take her under her wing so she could make Timmy fall in love with her. Trixie would probably reject her at first, but eventually come around and more or less mold Tootie into her image throughout the course of the episode, using Timmy as motivation, as eventually moral conflicts would probably come up, but in the end, it would work. Tootie would essentially be like Trixie's adopted little sister, and eventually she would succeed in winning Timmy over. I know this could easily sound sexist and shallow, but I guarantee you it is infinitely better than what we got. Okay, better story idea number 5. Well, this one isn't exactly specific to this episode as opposed to being targeted at the series as a whole. And that would be, just don't write in a love interest for Timmy Turner. If they did this and wanted a girl in the show who was around his age, either make her a friend, just a friend, or make her a magical creature like Cosmo and Wanda. I mean, for instance, Tootie could have easily been more or less a temporary replacement for Cosmo and Wanda, who would more or less fill in for them whenever they had to be somewhere else, and she would just pop up every now and again from episode to episode. You could have easily just made Trixie Tang a genie. I mean, in all fairness, the internet, and by internet I mean DeviantArt, really seems to like this one, or this concept. Missy could easily be the daughter of Cosmo and Wanda from the future, and you could just give her any reason for coming to modern day. I mean, to a point before she was born, and if you want conflict, just make her really overprotective of Timmy, who's her godbrother. You think that this wouldn't work, but overprotective siblings works. It really works as a concept in anime. And for the biggest improvement of all, you could easily have Chloe Carmichael as more or less a fairy disguised as a human who more or less puts Timmy through all these tests to see if he's worthy of something. That thing could literally be anything. I mean, for all we know, she could reveal herself as a fairy, say Timmy passed all the tests, and in this revelation, we'd find out she's actually ranked in between Jorgen and Cosmo and Wanda, and assigns them to be Timmy's fairy godparents full-time. So it wouldn't matter if Timmy grew up or not, he would actually be able to have Cosmo and Wanda even when he's an old man. And that would be 10 times better than the sexist piece of trash we got in the Fairly Odd Parents last season. And don't worry, I will eventually get to that. You see, the thing of the matter is, Stupid Cupid is this episode done right. Because it basically doesn't make Timmy Turner an asshole. I mean, yes, he does get a chance at a future with Trixie, but we see him sacrifice it by stopping his mom from marrying Mr. Crocker and his dad from marrying some weeds. So, in other words, Timmy was better in that episode than he was in Love Struck, because he was more than willing to put the desires of others above his own. We didn't see him get publicly humiliated. And yeah, what Timmy, Cosmo, Wanda, Poof did in the episode was kind of wrong. But even though I didn't see it, I would have preferred this to Love Struck any day. It is a lot less sexist. And proof that you can do a Valentine's Day special on a show with a male lead without it being completely gynocentric and misandric. Okay, and another thing that works against this episode is the fact that Tootie and Trixie are complete opposites in the worst possible way. Tootie is an obsessive stalker who only has a crush on Timmy because she is related to Vicky, the horrible babysitter who makes Timmy's life a living hell and was the sole reason that he got fairy godparents in the first place. Now, to be blunt, Cupid putting Timmy in a relationship with Tootie is completely fucked up because, yeah, they say relationships happen because these people have things in common. No, the only thing that Timmy has in common with Tootie is Vicky. So in other words, in order for this relationship to even work, Vicky would have to be in their lives constantly, making both their lives a living nightmare from age 10 until one of them dies. And that's seriously fucked up. And on the other hand, Trixie is basically the stereotypical popular girl who's nothing but a spoiled snob, who's completely written to be 100% cartoonish and over the top. This relationship wouldn't work because of the events of the episode Just the Two of Us. When Timmy wished that he and Trixie were the only humans on Earth, she eventually goes crazy and tries to kill him. So in other words, yeah, that relationship wouldn't work ever. Timmy would be doing all the work, and it would either end in a divorce or Trixie eventually breaking down and murdering him because he wasn't giving her enough attention. Because he's only one kid, and this spoiled bitch literally needs the attention and affection of, I'd say an entire crowd of people. There's no way this relationship could have ever worked. And the worst thing about this is that these are the only two options that Timmy gets throughout the show. He can either end up with the deranged, obsessive stalker, or the spoiled brat who will eventually go crazy and try to kill him. And this is kind of one of the worst things about this episode. Cupid is essentially a dick who, yes, it is his job to control everyone's love life, but in all fairness, he's basically being a dick. This boy's life is miserable enough having to deal with Vicky. I don't really think it's fair to put him in a relationship with Vicky's deranged sister, who's also his stalker, for reasons I pointed out earlier. In all fairness, Cupid is basically, throughout the episode, nothing more than a bastard who is more or less getting his just desserts, but the episode wants us to view Timmy as the one who's being unreasonable. And another thing about this episode that is so terrible is that there is no middle ground. I mean, they could have ended it with Timmy in a relationship with Veronica, but no, they couldn't do that. The one girl, the one popular girl who actually likes Timmy is given the shaft for this episode. And now I'm going to end this review by just saying this is Love Struck, the Fairly Odd Parents Valentine's Day special that was nothing more than a gynocentric piece of crap. In all fairness, this is why the episode Stupid Cupid was good. Because this episode was such a steaming pile of bullfuck. And with that said, I'm ending this review.